We live in a world that just never stops buzzing, right? Constant notifications, endless information, this pressure to keep up with everything digital.
Yeah, it can definitely leave you feeling a bit lost, kind of overwhelmed.
But what if there's a guide, and it's an ancient one, that speaks directly to this modern feeling? Today we're diving into the Bhagavad Gita. Not as some dusty old text, but as, well, a surprisingly relevant source for finding your footing in our digital lives.
Exactly. And we've pulled together some really fascinating stuff for this. We got excerpts looking at the core ideas from Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga.
Samkhya Yoga.
Think of it as the philosophy bit, focused on understanding reality and, really crucially, our own inner selves.
Got it.
And we also look at Karma Yoga. That's the path of action. And what's really interesting is seeing how these ancient principles can offer totally fresh perspectives on the modern challenges we face online.
Right.
We even looked at a Reddit discussion where people are actually debating the best English translations right now. Shows you it's still very much alive.
Okay, let's get into it then. Our mission here in this deep dive is really to unpack these core principles from Chapter 2.
Yeah.
We're talking about who we really are. The Atman, this eternal, unchanging sort of core within us, different from our physical bodies that are always changing.
That core distinction.
Yeah, and we'll explore the importance of knowledge, or Sankhya, and this really interesting idea of selfless action. And here's where it gets cool. We're going to connect these ancient ideas to things you probably deal with every day: information overload, keeping mentally well with social media, making good choices online, and that big human question, what's it all for?
Finding meaning, yeah.
Our goal is just to give you some clear insights, maybe some aha moments that link this old wisdom to your life right now.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's talk about Sankhya Yoga.
Right.
It's one of the 6 main schools of thought within Sanatana Dharma.
Always the broader tradition.
Exactly, often called the eternal way. Now, what's interesting is the difference between Sankhya and yoga itself. Think of Sankhya like understanding the blueprint of reality. It uses knowledge, analysis.
Okay, the theory.
Yeah, and yoga is more like the practical side, the discipline to actually experience that reality, learning to drive the car, not just read the manual.
So Chapter 2 is really laying that foundation, stressing how understanding this Sankhya part helps you navigate tricky situations, like having a map when you feel lost.
Absolutely. And probably the most fundamental piece of that map in Chapter 2 is the eternal nature of the soul, the Atman.
Okay.
The Gita teaches that this inner spark, this spirit, it wasn't just born and won't just die. It's always existed individually, past, present, future.
That's a big concept. So it's not like we just merge into some big cosmic soup.
Well, this teaching specifically refutes that idea, the Mayavadi idea of merging into an impersonal Brahman. It emphasizes individuality.
Right, so that feeling of I am me is actually eternal, unique, constant. That's quite different from how we usually think about ourselves, focusing so much on the physical, the here and now.
It really is. And the text explains that the Supreme Being eternally supports these individual souls, whether they're, caught up in the material world or liberated. And our sources say we can grasp the soul's existence through consciousness itself, that feeling of awareness. Like, the sun's there, even if clouds cover it, you see the light.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So even when we feel confused or down, that core awareness is still there underneath.
That's the idea, yeah.
So what are the qualities of this soul then?
The sources describe it as eternal, inherently full of knowledge, and naturally blissful, happy, basically.
This doesn't always feel that way.
Well, exactly. That inherent joy and understanding are currently sort of clouded over, obscured by our desire for separate enjoyment, for thinking we're the center of everything, independent.
Okay, so we have this eternal, knowledgeable, potentially joyful core that's just covered up by everyday desires and attachments. Makes sense why we don't always feel blissful.
Precisely. And the Gita goes further, distinguishing between the individual soul, the Anuatma, like a tiny spark, and the super soul, the Vibhuatma.
Super soul.
Yeah, think of it like the vast, all-encompassing consciousness. Both are conscious, but their capacity is different. The super soul knows everything past, present, future. Our individual soul, well, we forget things.
Like where to put my keys.
Ah, exactly. Think of the individual soul as a drop of water and the super soul as the ocean. Same stuff, different scale. One finite, one infinite.
So we're these little sparks, eternal but with a limited view, while the super soul sees the whole picture. Now this is really interesting. One source quotes verse 24 from Chapter 2, describing the Atma. It says it can't be cut, burned, wet, or dried.
Incredible qualities, right.
Yeah. eternal, all-pervading, stable, unmoving, ancient Sanatana, like this indestructible core.
And the commentary on that verse is fascinating. It says the basic elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, they only affect the physical body because the body's made of them.
Oh.
But the self, the Atma, isn't a mix of things. It's fundamental.
Yeah.
So it can't die.
So physical forces just have no power over this core self. It's beyond all that.
Exactly. And that has some pretty deep implications. If the Atma is eternal and everywhere, it's not stuck in time or space.
Right.
One interpretation even says it kind of swallows up time itself. And this understanding, as the source points out, logically leads to this ideal of universal love.
How so?
Well, if you truly get that the same eternal essence is inside everyone,
Then it's harder to feel separate or hostile towards them.
exactly. It really shifts how you see your connection to literally everyone and everything else.
It does. And Swami Vivekananda, mentioned in our sources, echoes this. He says the soul is indestructible everywhere, so no real reason to grieve for it. Death is just changing locations, moving from one body to another.
A transition, not an end. That's a powerful way to reframe death, isn't it? Less finality, more relocation.
Definitely less terrifying.
Indeed. And our source also touches on Atma Dharma, hinting that maybe Sanatana Dharma, eternal duty, really means the essential nature, the Dharma of the self itself.
Okay, so building on this eternal soul idea, Krishna then talks to Arjuna about the flip side, the temporary nature of the physical body.
Right. He tells him basically, don't grieve for these physical forms that will eventually go because the soul itself is beyond birth and death.
Which is huge in that battlefield context.
Yeah.
Arjuna's devastated at the thought of killing family and teachers.
Exactly. Krishna's trying to give him that bigger perspective on life, death, and duty.
And our sources connect this directly to rebirth. If the soul didn't move on, if death was the final end.
Then Arjuna might have more reason to fear the karmic consequences, the sin of killing. The soul's continuity changes the whole ethical equation.
But it's not a simple anything goes message.
Yeah.
One source brings up a complex point from the Manu Samhita.
Ah, yes. The idea that violence can, in specific contexts, be a necessary duty. Even suggesting a murderer should be killed to prevent worse suffering for them in their next life.
So that adds some nuance. It's not just about avoiding harm, but about righteous action within a specific context.
Right. Context and dharma duty are key. The Gita isn't promoting random violence. It's addressing Arjuna's role as a warrior in what's framed as a just cause.
And within that context, we get this idea of dying while performing your duty.
Yeah, our source explains this can lead to better future lives, like heavenly planets, or if you win a righteous war, you enjoy the result. Both lead to happiness in some form.
But not doing your duty.
That leads to incurring sins, losing your reputation, infamy, which
Yeah.
for a respected person is seen as worse than death itself.
Wow. So a strong emphasis on fulfilling your role and the consequences, good or bad. And Krishna calls out Arjuna's compassion here.
He does. He suggests Arjuna's hesitation isn't just pure compassion, but also attachment, a kind of sense gratification, wanting to avoid the personal pain of loss, of seeing kinsmen die, or the difficulty of fighting.
Contrasting that worldly happiness with a higher purpose, rooted in understanding the eternal soul.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got the eternal soul, the temporary body, the importance of duty. Now let's shift to something that feels incredibly relevant today. Selfless action, karma yoga.
Yes, this is huge.
This brings us to a really key verse, verse 47 in chapter 2. It says you have the right to work, but not to be attached to the results.
Right. The outcome, the fruit of your action, shouldn't be the main driver. And you shouldn't just give up action either, out of fear or laziness.
That feels pretty radical. In our world, it's all about results, achievements, metrics. So work, but don't be driven by what you'll get. How does that work in practice?
Well, the idea is when you work, offering the results to, say, a higher purpose, or just focusing on the work itself without being fixated on the specific outcome, it actually brings mental peace.
Peace?
Because think about it, when you're constantly worried about what will happen, will I succeed? What will people think? It just creates anxiety, fear of failure, wastes so much mental energy.
Totally been there.
Yeah.
Like hitting refresh on your email waiting for a reply.
Exactly. It's like this ancient text is talking directly about modern anxieties.
It really is.
And the sources are clear. Giving up attachment to results doesn't mean stop working or become lazy. That kind of inaction, born of inertia or fear, that's how they call it, actually holds you back spiritually.
So let go of attachment to the fruits, not the work.
Precisely. It's about shifting your focus from the destination, the outcome, to the journey, the action itself.
One source mentioned interpreting it as accepting all outcomes, good or bad, as a kind of grace or prasada.
That's a common understanding, yeah. It cultivates acceptance, stops you riding those emotional roller coasters based on external results. This idea of working without a selfish motive, just doing your duty for a bigger reason, leads to equanimity, that inner balance, and spiritual growth. Selfish actions, on the other hand, they create karmic knots and often lead to disappointment when things inevitably don't go exactly as planned.
Like cooking for friends, you focus on doing it well, with care, because you value the act of giving, not just to get praise for the food.
Perfect example. And remember Harry Ball's farmer analogy.
Right, the farmer controls the plowing, the sowing.
But not the rain, the sun, the final harvest. He has to do the work for any chance of a harvest, but he can't guarantee the outcome.
That makes sense, detached from the uncontrollable result.
Exactly. And a karma yogi, someone practicing this, isn't high on victory or crushed by defeat. The joy is in the service, the effort itself.
Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, mentioned in our material, really drive this home. Perform duties unselfishly, offer the results. He even says chanting God's name is work. You can't actually stop working entirely.
You really can't, and this is where it all circles back so powerfully to our digital age. This concept, nishkama karma, selfless action, is like a toolkit for managing modern stress and anxiety.
How so?
By focusing on the task, the duty, whether it's your job, your interactions, whatever, without being constantly hooked on the outcomes, the likes, the shares, the replies, the external validation.
You find more inner peace.
Exactly. It frees up so much mental energy.
Wow, in a world obsessed with online image and metrics, detaching from those outcomes feels almost revolutionary for mental health.
It really does. And the Gita hits on other things amplified today, like ethics. Verse 38, our sources mention, talks about treating pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat the same when doing your duty.
Impartiality.
Yeah, integrity. That's crucial for navigating tricky digital stuff like data privacy, AI ethics, how we treat people online. Act fairly, righteously, regardless of personal gain or loss. We need that compass online.
Definitely. And what about finding meaning? Sometimes the digital world feels so superficial.
Right. Verse 34 points to seeking guidance from wise teachers to get true knowledge, understand your real mission. It implies scrolling endlessly won't give you deep meaning. You need more profound, guided exploration.
So the web has info, but maybe not wisdom.
Something like that. Interestingly, though, our sources note how digital platforms are being used to spread the Gita's teachings globally, apps, social media, websites.
The irony. Ancient wisdom via modern tech.
It's fascinating. But the sources also wisely caution about authenticity. You still need reliable sources and maybe even personal guidance, not just random posts.
Makes sense. Eknath Easwaran's view was mentioned digital tools are great, but we need to ensure the depth isn't lost.
Exactly. And that Reddit thread about translations, it just shows there are many takes on this text. Gita Press, Gamfirananda, Chinmayananda were recommended, with cautions about others depending on what you're looking for.
So it underlines that exploring different viewpoints is probably a good idea for the listener. It's a personal journey.
Absolutely. Which kind of brings us to the main takeaways. Chapter 2 really lays the groundwork. The eternal self, the temporary body, the importance of duty, and this powerful idea of selfless action.
The key thing is, these aren't just abstract ideas from long ago. They offer really practical tools for dealing with modern life, especially our digital lives. Tools for inner calm, ethical choices, finding meaning.
Couldn't have said it better.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. How might really internalizing this difference between your eternal self, the Atman, and your temporary physical and digital self change how you view daily anxieties, or that constant search for meaning online? And maybe think about one way you could consciously try applying selfless action, doing something well for its own sake, without being hooked on the outcome in your life, maybe even in your online interactions. Could that bring more peace?
It's definitely food for thought. And maybe check out a translation, perhaps one mentioned earlier, or just delve deeper into Sankhya or Karma Yoga if that sparked your interest. Remember, understanding this stuff is an ongoing process, very personal.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Bhagavad Gita's timeless wisdom for modern times. We hope it gave you some fresh perspectives.